There was a real buzz that went round the ether when we exchanged emails when we heard that Mark Henderson would kindly agree to be our guest speaker today. Mark Henderson is Deputy Chairman of Eaves and Hawkes and is the Chairman of the Savile Row Bespoke. This was set up in 2004 to protect and develop the Savile Row suit. It takes over 60 hours to make a suit. It's handmade. It's made on one site over a period of 6 to 8 weeks. This is the definition of a Savile Row suit. Now, those of you that work in cold, dusty, by the nature of the materials that you use, possibly dirty workshops, might think that there isn't a great link between what you do and a beautiful Savile Row bespoke suit. Well, there is a link, and it's an important link, and that link is craft. I was asking Mark what was his passion, and he told me that his passions were well-made things, simplicity, elegance and beauty, a good Benedictine influenced joie de vivre. I'm sure a lot of those passions help in the mentoring that he gives in the Crafted scheme, which is a scheme that's been set up by Arts and Business to help 12 people a year grow their businesses. And I have a feeling that the Arts and Business website, where I looked a couple of weeks ago, must have known that our theme was craft and passion, because this is what they say about Crafted, which is this scheme. Crafted is a mentoring programme passionate about connecting the skills of those who have built successful businesses with those who have the potential to do so. Others of Mark's passions are beekeeping, though he describes himself as a not very successful beekeeper, but he is ace at medlar jelly and marmalade. So over to you, Mark.
Listening to Robin speak, it really sort of brings into context the journey that I've had over the last few years. You're absolutely right about the link between Savile Row and craftsmanship. In some respects, I went to a thing called Assemble at the Craft Council around last year, and just as I was leaving, I had to go back off to a meeting and about halfway through the afternoon session. Somebody said the problem with the luxury goods industry is it's hijacked the craft agenda. And I thought, oh dear, I come from the luxury goods industry. I think I better leave right now. And so I hope that I'm not the devil incarnate to any of you. This is the last slide that I showed at a conference I spoke to for the World Textile and Design Association events last year. And the point I was making to them, in fact, I was, as a matter of interest, I was the speaker following somebody from a German brand called Esprit, which prides itself on the speed with which it turns around new collections in the shops every 4 weeks. And my closing comment was that in some respects Savile Row epitomises slow fashion. I tend to think that the opportunities for craft right now are probably as good as they've ever been. Maybe the Luddites were right. We've seen skills destroyed and overtaken by machinery, but now we're choked with landfill and thinking again. And while Primark and Uniqlo aren't exactly dead on their feet, their sales are dipping. As wealth increases across the globe, so does the desire for better things, better food, better clothes, better watches, but also better lifestyle, better quality of life. The luxury brands are booming. Ultimately, I think this is going to lead to a diminution in quantity and an increase in value. Let me set this in a Savile Row context for you. I was made managing director of Gibbs & Hawkes in 1996. Prior to that, I'd been managing director to a little company on Jermyn Street called Check and Speak, which made perfumery and bathrooms. And we had a factory, in fact, we had two little factories in the East End, one making perfumery and the other assembling bathroom products, which were made in foundries and platers in Birmingham. Prior to that, I'd worked at Dunham, Mary Quant, and a family engineering business. When I arrived on Savile Row, I was really rather disappointed because I couldn't actually see any tailoring happening. And it was clear as I talked to the staff that there was a split camp. There were those that believed that bespoke tailoring with workshops in the West End, where now you're paying, well, certainly 100 yards away on Bond Street, you're paying £900 a square foot per year rental. But there were those that believed that having a bespoke tailoring business in the West End was a complete anachronism. And there were those, particularly those practicing the craft, who thought rather wistfully that it was all very difficult. You couldn't get young people into the trade. They all wanted to become fashion designers, and that nowadays customers weren't prepared to wait for anything, and they prefer to buy an Armani suit off the peg. Now, to be honest, by far the largest part of the Gibbs & Hawkes business is not in bespoke tailoring, but its fame and reputation was built on heritage. Naval and military tailors to Nelson and Wellington, holders of royal warrants since 1809, and this marvellous address, number 1 Savile Row. Back to marketing for a minute. Marketing is about telling a story, but it's not just about telling a story well, it's also, ultimately, it has to be a true story. And I think that is the case now more than it has been ever, because there is so much media around that it's very, very easy to find out when something is not true. So what do you do about tailoring? Could we turn the situation around so that bespoke handcraft tailoring was no longer an anachronism? It seemed to me that in order to do this, we couldn't do it alone. But what we needed to do was persuade our neighbours to join us in marketing the street and training young people. It seemed obvious. So I got a meeting together of the businesses on the row, not just tailoring businesses, but there were other clothing retailers, there were people with offices, galleries and restaurants and so on. This was about 1998, by the way, just as the dot-com boom was happening. Savile Row, the bastion of the suit, versus dress down and warnings of the death of the suit. It was bad. There were old guard tailors who resented the new flash tailors, like young Patrick Grant, who's pictured here. Patrick, incidentally, is a tailor, but he's also just won the British Fashion Awards for the Best Upcoming Designer. There were splinter groups who'd left one company and set up on their own. There were retailers who wanted street parties to get more customers on the row, and there were conservative tailors who didn't want the hoi polloi coming down the street. Those in the offices liked the old school atmosphere of the street, and the gallerists and the restaurateurs wanted new money. There were obviously areas of common ground, but I have to say that my public spiritedness deserted me, and it was just simply too difficult. And so I went back into Gibbs & Hawkes and carried on running the business, opening a few shops in China and doing that sort of thing. However, something I said must have hit a few nerves, and in 2004 it finally all came together. These were the elements. There was a headline in the Evening Standard which read, "Tailors hanging on by a thread." The story suggested that property developers were intent on redeveloping the workshops into retail and offices, that it was impossible to find young trainees, and that anyway designer labels were inexorably rising, and the day of handcrafted tailoring was over. Just not true. First of all, there is no question that it was possible to protect the name of Savile Row. Secondly, I thought we could bring people into training. And thirdly, we can just promote Savile Row. The important thing from my perspective was to protect and promote the art of handcraft tailoring on Savile Row. That was the one common thread that we all wanted. It could preserve the reputation of the Row, it could sustain and create jobs and businesses, maintain an icon of British style and craft, keep it a prestigious place to have an office, and attract the very best menswear or related businesses, perhaps shoemakers, barbers, silk retailers, and so on. So this time I went back to the real bespoke tailors, and just 3 of us to start with, and we developed a plan. And the elements of the plan were, first of all, to enlist the support of Westminster Council, who have been utterly brilliant, in order to protect the workshops. We persuaded them to commission a report on the value of Savile Row bespoke tailoring to the economy and the community. The second thing we did was we formed a joint company called Savile Row Bespoke, pooling our resources. And thirdly, we registered a name and a trademark to ensure that the term Savile Row Bespoke was protected from abuse. It's a long story, but it did take time, and the important thing is that it is truthful, and that it also has a happy ending. In March, ooh, that's not the one I wanted. That's the one I wanted. In March 2006, Westminster Council's report was published at about the same time as Abercrombie and Fitch, a giant American company, announced their intention to open a huge shop at the end of Savile Row. Massive hoardings with half-naked teenagers appeared at the end of the row as the time to unveil the report's finding emerged. And this is really where the story starts. Westminster report noted that Savile Row had a worldwide reputation for bespoke tailoring stretching back 200 years, but it was an important constituent of the attractiveness of the West End, part of its diversity and richness. It acted as an inspiration for things like the British Fashion Council, Central St Martin's, and all of the other things relating to the British fashion industry, and so on. It provided considerable direct and indirect employment, and it faced challenges in recruiting and keeping skills. With our PR company, we organised a photo shoot of 100 tailors out on the road, which attracted worldwide coverage. The message was, we're here and we're here to stay. Still, there are thousands of people, millions of people in this country who have no idea that such a thing as a working tailor on Savile Row, so there's a lot more to be done. At the same time, we launched our website, focusing on showing what a justifiably fabulous reputation the Row had, with articles written by people like James Sherwood and Nick Fuchs. The BBC commissioned a 3-part documentary from Savile Row Productions, who spent the best part of a year with us. Some of you may have seen the documentary. There were moments of absolute, utter embarrassment in it, and there were moments of true joy in it. I did an interesting exercise, which was, I did a 1-minute edit of it, because we received an award for the work we've done with craft. And it is an absolute love story. It really is. We also received invitations to show around the world. We were invited to show at the closing day of Paris Couture Week. We went to Florence, to the largest menswear show in the world, Pitti Uomo, and we went to Tokyo. And each one of these events we partly funded ourselves, and partly we found sponsorship from willing partners. We also, in the meantime, set up an apprenticeship scheme. There were 2 parts to this. The first part was a pre-apprenticeship scheme which we set up with Newham College. And we set it up in January 2007, so just about 4 years ago. Since it was set up, we've had 200 students through it, and nearly half of our apprentices come from Newham now. We then, from the people who have done the pre-apprenticeship course, some of them then have gone on to become apprentices on Savile Row, and we formalised our own apprenticeship scheme, presenting the first complete awards last summer at the Merchant Tailors Halls. It's quite poignant when you're standing somewhere like the Merchant Tailors, and here you have a master and a learner, a student, an apprentice. And it's quite poignant to stand there and know that that body's been, that Merchant Tailors has been in existence for 700 years. Gives you a certain amount of optimism. Other highlights have been, we did a Friday late at the V&A in September '09, and the publication last year of a magnificent book by Thames and Hudson, Savile Row, the Master Tailors of British Bespoke. What are the lessons to be drawn from this, and how can I help you? Well, first of all, it worked. We have no difficulty in selling bespoke suits at £4,000. We have about 6 months' work booked. We now have 14 members. We have over 30 apprentices at work, and a thriving business and workrooms that will still be here in 100 years' time. Absolutely no question at all about that. Second is, I think the time is right for heritage crafts. We're all aware of the tide turning against mass consumption towards making things. Recycling is an everyday activity. Marks and Spencer's offering money off vouchers for returned clothing. The reporting requirements of public companies. The Wolf Report, the words of John Hayes, the huge success of Edmund Val's book. The luxury goods industry has been inexorably growing for decades. People are willing to pay more for rare things with a story, particularly if they can tell their friends about it. And all of you have a story. Everyone I know is talking about repatriating production and sourcing. The good cloth mills in Yorkshire and Somerset are thriving again, even mid-recession. The cost of Chinese sourcing is rocketing. The high minimums and the cost of travel connected with sourcing outside Europe are leading to the opportunity of a drift back to making and a willingness to buy things made in Europe and indeed locally. Making equals jobs, and the will is there. Britain has got incredible craft heritage, really incredible. 108 livery companies in the city, street names, places like Bermondsey, Smithfield, Soho and so on. Our teaching institutions, the RCA, West Dean. Great shows, Collect, Origin, Art in Action. So the time is right. What you have to do is apply simply the 4 Ps, straight out of a marketing textbook. Price, product, promotion, place. Just on price to start with, how do you get a proper premium for a crafted item? All good craft people should be earning way over the minimum wage. Savile Row tailors were earning on average some £20 an hour. To do this, you have to have the other 3 Ps in place. Product. This is an incredibly subjective thing. All of you know what you are good at. All of you know what constitutes a well-crafted item. But let's face it, just being handmade may give something character, but is it desirable? Personally, I'd have bought from 1 in 20 of the people showing at Art in Action. And probably not many more at either Origin or Collect. For my money, it has to be either beautiful and functional, or, and then we're actually talking about art, not craft, beautiful, sublimely made, and with a story to tell. But please, let's not assume that all craft is good and all design is bad, that the world owes us a living. If you see your craft as recreational or a hobby, then fine, take your chances. But if you see it as a business, then ask yourself, what do your potential customers really want? Even ask whether what you do can be improved upon, or can you find someone who can help you improve it, collaborate, maybe even work with a designer. Promotion. There are bags of opportunity for promotion, as Robin is spectacularly finding out. The HCA is everywhere, whether it's online or in print. Craft is a pretty hot topic right now. But you have to have a clear, consistent, and in my view, generally positive message. There's enough bad news about a daunting number of people who need help. The government isn't going to be much help. It hasn't even sorted out bankers' bonuses yet, and there's some pretty huge issues to deal with. This is where a trade organisation such as the HCA can be incredibly helpful. Place. This is one of the hardest issues that the craft industry does face. You might have the right product, and you might have a positive message, but how do you connect with your customers? Do you pay to show at a fair? Do you sell online? Do you only sell locally, relying on word of mouth? Do you work through galleries, who in my view have a very narrow audience? Are you prepared and able to give retailers the margin to sell your product? They may seem greedy at 2.5 times or more markup, but when you're paying perhaps hundreds of pounds per square foot in rent, have sales staff often standing idle, being a shopkeeper is not a route to riches. I don't know if any of you have heard Priscilla Carluccio speak, but I watched her speak here last year, and one of the things she said was, I set out to sell crafts, and I ended up with a dress shop. And she was telling me the other day that she set out to sell absolutely beautiful ceramics from one of the best-known practitioners in the country, but again couldn't get the price for his products that she needed, and so she's ended up selling his apprentices' products instead. Well, I think that's absolutely fine, but it's a shame that she can't get the premium, and I'm absolutely convinced that she could. Anyway, on top of that, you have to deal with questions like how you organise your life, are you supplementing your income by teaching, do you take on an apprentice, and so on. And by the way, I would like here to get in a quick plug for the most wonderful charity of which I'm a trustee, Quest. We give grants of up to £15,000 towards training a craft, and this can go to a college or to a master craftsman. Anyway, in my view, it's all doable. And if I can help, I'll be happy to. Many of you clearly have the basis of what I would call a luxury goods business. These are some pictures taken by a friend of mine, Catherine Locke, who did a really fascinating tour looking at craft around the UK last year. So, thank you for listening, and I'm thoroughly optimistic about the future of craft.